Welcome to DEIJ Hot Takes. My name is Daryl Sinclair, and this is the podcast where we discover the bold and transformative ideas shaping diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice work today. In this episode, we are joined by Kimberly Wong, the Diversity, Inclusion, and Wellbeing Lead at Verdala International School and an early years teacher. Kimberly, thank you so much for taking the time out to join us today. There's been a little bit of planning in making this happen. And I'd love if you could share with us your DEIJ hot take that's currently guiding some of your work.
Thanks, Daryl. Um, there's lots of things that I would love to delve into. My main thing that I really live off of as an early years teacher is if we want diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging to continue to thrive, then these topics and themes should be explored in the early years education as much as possible.
Excellent. So it's the idea of how we perceive the value of contributions being as early as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And this is quite a hot take. This is something whereby many people contest how early can we start discussing these things. So
Mm-hmm.
I'd love it if you could take us through what this might look like in reality, why you might feel this is a hot take, and how do you make this a reality in the work that you do?
So in early years, I actually have told many people I think it's actually easier to introduce topics of diversity and inclusion and equity in early years, because the simple basis is we want to make sure everyone feels belonged in our community. We want to make sure that you are kind to others. So that general statement is what we thrive off of in early years, anyways. Um, and so when people think about diverse topics, often I think they're thinking from an adult lens where it can be quite heavy, very controversial. It's not all black and white, it's very nuanced. So, from an adult point of view, it's a very heavy topic to introduce to early years. But as an early years educator, I actually think it's a bit easier because the foundation of everything is diverse people exist in the world. There's diversity everywhere, and in early years, we want to make sure everyone feels like they belong in our community, that they are kind towards each other no matter what. And so that generally is a little easier to introduce to younger children. A lot of time for me, it's just about exposure. So a lot of my stories that I tell in class, or a lot of the videos that I include, or even the topics, they'll just include a variety of people, the diverse groups, diverse communities, and for my students, as long as they are seeing people are different from them, they're told stories where there are diverse characters or diverse groups. Um, as they get older, the reality of diversity and how people are different, that's the norm for them by that point. Um, if my stories included just homogenous people, people who looked like exactly like my students, or if they only saw characters that looked exactly like them and their families, when they're faced with the reality of diversity when they're older, that's when it becomes weird or abnormal for them. So for me, it's really important to expose as much as possible when they're younger.
Okay, that's a really nice way of wrapping it up. So it's almost as if within early years we can stick to the purest form of diversity and belonging, the reality that diverse people exist. They are allowed to, they deserve to
Mm-hmm.
exist, they are amongst us, and they have the right to belong. And that
Mm-hmm.
lays, and I love the addition of the kindness there, the kindness being a key element to people feeling a sense of belonging. And
Yeah.
from there, as they get older, maybe they can begin to engage with some of the greater complexity that we worry
Mm-hmm.
about as adults.
Yeah.
Is there any particular example or lesson that comes to mind for you when you're doing this with the students, where you have perhaps an activity where you're showing diverse people? Because I imagine in early years, not a lot of this is to do with deep reading and writing. It's more to do with your inputs as a teacher. I love your use of the
Mhm.
word exposure. Is there any activity that comes to mind that you're particularly proud of?
Often at the beginning of the year, and this I think probably not just early years, but other elementary grades do this as well. You talk about who you are as a person, where you belong in society, or who you are amongst your peers or family in those types of communities. And so often I start the year off with a photo of my own family. My family consists of me, my mom, my aunt, and my grandparents. And one of the first questions I get every year is, "Where's your dad?" And I then explain my dad passed away when I was a baby, so my mom raised me on her own. And luckily, my family was nearby to help out with a lot of things. So for my family, it consists of my mom, my aunt, my grandparents, which for the majority of international school children, that actually differs from their family. A lot of the time, it's a mom and a dad and maybe a sibling. Um, so by sharing my personal experience of, well, my family will look a little different from your family, but there's still a lot of similarities. We still love each other. We still hang out together. We still celebrate family holidays and we eat together during special holidays. A lot of it is the same. It's just I have different types of people.
Yeah.
And so when we're building our classroom community and the children are figuring out who they are and where they belong, we talk a lot about our different families and what they might look like. Um, Someone I talked to once said we should be identifying similarities within our families, but also celebrating the differences, and that really stuck with me because um, a lot of these children, they're lucky enough to have families that ensure that they're well fed, they're always clothed, they have a shelter, and and the love that's there is our similarities, but what they might look like will be a little different, and that's okay.
Yeah. And it's great here. With this use of your bringing your lived experience into the classroom, one thing which is very close to my heart is the idea that the knowledge we bring through our lived experience is also a valid way for us to learn. So that's really nice modeling for the
Mhm.
students as well. Now, I've spoken to a number of educators and across the years, and sometimes this approach can lead to some challenges. So, in early years education in particular, we often find in primary and early years, the parents are particularly involved. They're very sensitive to what
Mhm.
their children are learning or what they're exposed to. So, how do you approach this in a way which keeps the parents on board and perhaps I'll use the language comfortable and informed enough? Because there's a number of stories coming to mind for me where a teacher may have shared something with a class and a parent has said, I don't want my child to know about that.
Mhm.
How do you navigate that kind of space?
It can be tricky because, as you said, when it comes to early years, parents, they tend to be a bit more involved. They want to make sure how we are teaching aligns with their own values.
Okay.
So it can be tricky to navigate depending on how they view diversity, inclusion, and well-being. And so something that I really strive to do as much as possible is include the parents in all aspects of our learning. So not just the diverse themes that we will explore, but the when it comes to math or language or storytelling or any of the other subjects that we do, I try and include them as much as possible. I try and bring them into the classroom. I try to get them to come in, read stories from their own countries, have them talk about their celebrations that they do as a family. And as a class community, I find that makes it a little more helpful and easier when we come across themes that are a bit trickier, such as race and culture or gender or even pride. they're more willing to come to the table then. They're more willing to hear out. They understand how I bring in their celebrations and their thoughts, and they trust me a bit more when I have already shown that I can include them in how their children learn.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's something that I try really hard to do every year, to make sure that the parents not only understand what I'm teaching when it comes to those controversial topics, but to also feel included with their learning. Because in my experience with early years, especially, we're kind of a team. I'll teach during the day; they teach in the home, and so to make a well-rounded kid, it has to be all of us together.
Yeah, this is sounding like a wonderfully inclusive classroom. All of these things that you're doing to make sure that the parents also feel that they belong and they're a part of what's taking place, giving ownership to the learners. And I love your use of the word trust there. So even when something comes up, they know that they can communicate with you and share with you. Now, a little thing that we were discussing before we started recording that I'd love to add in here, but what are some examples that you may have seen where the work you're doing in early years perhaps expresses itself in some of the ways that the students perhaps express themselves later on in school, or maybe
hmm
some of the experiences of the other teachers that you can trace back to some of the work you've been doing, or some of your success stories?
I had one the other day. I've been thinking about this a lot. And I actually moved up with my class this year. So I was teaching kindergarten last year, and I've moved up to grade 1, but with the same group of children. And and it's been nice to know them already, and I understand how some of them think, and it's been nice to continue building our classroom community. um, and last year, when we were talking a lot about pride, and just how some people identify in one way, it could be similar to you or it could be different. And we had lots of discussions around just how people feel in the world, and how they feel inside themselves, and how they sometimes wish to express it. There were a lot of questions about just when it comes to non traditional genders, when it comes to uh, people who might express themselves differently from how they're used to. There were a lot of questions about that. Again, they're all innocent questions. They just, with their questions, they just want to know how the world works. Um, and this year, one of my students, we were going through all the new teachers that have come to our school. One of the teachers now identifies their prefix as mixed instead of miss. And so one of my kids, of course, asked, why do they call themselves mixed instead of miss? And my answer, similar to what I would have said in kindergarten, that's just their name. That's just the name they want to be called. And I believe last year there would have been a few more follow-up questions. There would have been just trying to understand it a bit more. This year, the kid just said, "Okay," and since then they've just been saying mixed, because they know that's how that person wants to be called. And
Yeah.
it's those little moments where I can see growth, where I can see that acceptance comes so much more naturally to younger kids than to older kids. But even as they've been exposed to it, I can see that they've continued that acceptance as they've grown, even though it's been a year since we've talked a little bit about things like this. They continue to show that acceptance, and that's just how people want to be called, and that's what they accept. It's
I
really nice
mean,
to
yeah,
see.
that is a really brilliant example because I think we often get confused with this within education. Um, Sometimes it's like, is more questions good or is more questions bad? And I think what you've shown there in that example is that often our questions are rooted in a challenging it. It's rooted in a
Mm,
but why, but that's not the norm. But
yeah.
and asking not really for learning and understanding, but for justification.
Mhm.
Whereas all the justification that's needed is that's how that person wants to express themselves, that's how they feel comfortable, that's what helps them to belong. And
Mhm.
at the root of it, especially in the younger years, that's the core message. And then as we get older, we can start getting into social politics, and
Mhm.
but at the root of it, that's the basis. That's really wonderful. So thank you so much for sharing. At this point, all I, as much as I would love, you've got such great examples of the things that you're doing, and hopefully people will reach out to learn more of them from you. But right now, if there was a one message you could leave our listeners with, what might be that key takeaway? It could be a resource, it could be a book, it could be a reflective question, or just the key idea you'd like them to take away. But what's a key takeaway from what you're sharing with us today?
Um, I think the main takeaway I would love everyone, students or families or people in general, would be it diversity, inclusion, equity, belonging. It doesn't necessarily have to be um, a big controversial argument, conversation that goes on for years, decades. Um, it can be a simple enough message as everyone should feel like they belong, and to allow younger students, to allow the younger generation to know that and to learn that. It doesn't necessarily have to be a complicated. For them, it's simple enough as to making sure they feel represented in the things that they see, but also their peers feel represented, that the people around them feel represented, that people in the world feel represented. It's as simple as that for them. So I hope as people continue to look at DEIJ themes and as people continue to talk about it, I know it can get complicated as an adult because it is quite nuanced. But there is an underlining idea that we want to make sure people feel belonged, and if the younger years can be exposed to that as much as possible, then I think it'll help grow that thought as people get older.
Wow. I mean, thank you so much for sharing with us today, Kimberly. For our listeners, I'm going to place your LinkedIn account down there so that they can connect with you if they want to reach out and perhaps collaborate with you, learn some more of the brilliant things that you're doing, explore your ideas. And for everyone, thank you for watching or listening. And I will see you on the next episode of DEIJ Hot Takes. Thank you again, Kimberly.